The 18 Strong Podcast with Jeff Pellizzaro, episode number 55.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzaro.
Hello, and welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. I'm Jeff Pellizzaro, your host, golf fitness professional, and physical therapist. And I have to say, I'm very, very excited for not just today's episode, but also just the week that's going on here with 18 Strong and really with St. Louis golf and the whole fitness profession around golf here in St. Louis. We've got an incredible seminar that's here in our local area for DNS, which is Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization, being hosted by some of the guys at Winchester Spine and Sport. It's an international convention where there's going to be chiropractors, physical therapists, fitness guys, all revolving around the world of golf, which is a very new concept for DNS. And I know it's going to be a fantastic event. And in honor of that, we've had plenty of people coming into St. Louis for this. And so today I had the opportunity to go and play a little bit of golf with my buddy Austin Panter, who you may remember from episode number 11 of the 18 Strong Podcast. Max Prokopi from Virginia, who was episode number 24 on the podcast. And then another chiropractor from Virginia, Todd Nieder, who is buddies with Max, does a lot of work with him in Virginia. And quite possibly, Todd, if you play your cards right, maybe a future guest on the 18 Strong Podcast. But we had the opportunity to go out to Boone Valley, which is one of the greatest golf courses you can ever play, out in Augusta, Missouri. So I have to give a big thanks to the guys at Boone Valley for letting us come out and use their course and beat it up a little bit. I played some of the worst golf I've played in a long time, but we had a blast, got to get to know these guys a little bit better. So Todd, Brian, Ron, Mike, all you guys out of Boone Valley, Sean, Chris, everybody out there that welcomed us, I want to really give you a huge thanks. I know there's a lot of St. Louis folks listening to this episode. And to my buddy Matt, hope you don't mind. We had to put a few drinks on your tab, but I promise I'll pay you back for those. But for all of you that are listening, I've got an incredible guest, a guy who I've known really for about 20 years or so, Michael Wellington. Mike and I went to our freshman year of high school together at St. Louis University High School. Mike then transferred to another school, went on to play college golf, professional golf. The last 3 years, he has really spent time building an organization, a charitable organization called Birdies for Bipolar, and recently wrote a book, Birdies, Bogeys, and Bipolar Disorder, which I have to tell you is a fascinating book. I read it in under a week, which is kind of phenomenal for me. Usually it takes me 6 months to read a book. But Mike and I just kind of reunited through the golf world, and Mike came in about a year ago, put together a program for him. He recently has come back in. He's been out of town down in Florida working with Ken McDonald, and Mike came in recently as he's back in St. Louis. We're going to do a little bit of work together, and I got a copy of the book from him and immediately wanted to bring him on the podcast. So I know there's a lot of St. Louis folks listening, hopefully a lot of people that I know and haven't heard from in a long time that know Mike and I as mutual friends. So I know that you guys are really going to enjoy this episode, but there's a ton of takeaways out of Mike's book, and I don't want you to be kind of confused as to why I have Mike on and why we're talking about this subject, because the whole mental illness and bipolar disorder may not seem like something that necessarily fits into a golf fitness podcast. But as you've seen over the last 50 or so episodes, this podcast is about a lot more than just fitness. It's about every aspect of golf, mental, physical, nutrition, everything. And I think there's so many great takeaways and incredible stories that Mike shares in this book that you're going to get a lot out of, not necessarily just from the mental illness side, but also there's a lot of things that Mike brings into play as far as just how to live a more balanced life, how to play a more balanced game, and, kind of go with the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows of golf, and, the different moods and everything that we go through. So I know that you're going to get a lot out of today's episode. And before I forget, I want to make sure I give the website to Mike's book and his charity, which is birdiesforbipolar.org. And that's birdies, 4, bipolar.org. And we'll have that linked up in the show notes for you, so you have all the links to find Mike and his organization. So without further ado, here is Mike, and I'll catch you on the other side. Hey, Michael, welcome to the 18 Strong podcast.
Jeff, great to be with you today. I had actually learned about the podcast when I was down in Florida, doing some work down there with Kenny McDonald, who's doing a lot of the similar work you're doing. Glad to be here and looking forward to sharing some new knowledge for a lot of your listeners.
Yeah, Ken and I have actually kind of connected, obviously, about you, and you've started coming into Elevated Performance a little bit, and so Ken's doing some great work down there, and really appreciate him reaching out and touching base, and so that really kind of put you and I back in touch. For everybody out there listening, Mike and I actually went to high school together freshman year. Before it was a freshman year, and then you went over to DeSmet after that. Yeah,
freshman year at SLUH High, and then they had enough of me over there, and I made the trip across town over to DeSmet. And you know, Jeff, I was thinking about that before we talked this morning about all the great people that I met, and I'm still friends with from SLUH High. I mean, SLUH High is a very wonderful school with a lot of important people that have come out of there, and it's good to see that you're continuing to carry that torch of SLUH High, those kind of guys doing good things out in the world.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know that there were a couple of those guys mentioned in your book, and we'll get to talking about everything going on with the book. But Mike, for the listeners, give them a little background on you, your golf career, what you're doing now, where you are, and then we'll jump into everything else after that.
Yeah, my golf career started at a very, very young age in St. Louis, Missouri at Westboro Country Club. My dad was a golfer. You know, he grew up across the street from Westboro from the time he was 5 years old and still plays there today. He's been a member there for over 60 years. So I was able to learn the game from him at a very early age. I didn't play AJGA golf growing up. You know, I played soccer, basketball, and golf as well. And just like, I played a lot of different sports, but really started to fall in love with golf my junior year of high school. I, played well at the district tournament, played well at the state tournament, was able to parlay that into a college scholarship down at Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama, which at the time was an NAIA school. Now I believe it's a Division II school. And I played 4 years down there and was an All-American my junior year, and had some wonderful experiences down there playing with some great players. And our team made it to the national championship all 4 years. We were lucky to play places at the national championship like Tulsa Country Club, PGA National down in Palm Beach Gardens, Southern Hills back in Tulsa, and then we played some dog track in New Mexico that I don't remember my senior year. But after that, I turned pro in 2003 after I got out of college. Played amateur golf for a little while around St. Louis right out of college, but turned pro in 2003, and I played pretty much every developmental tour in the United States. The ones that come to mind are the Hooters Tour, now the NGA Tour, the Tar Heel Tour. I'm not sure what that's called now in North Carolina. I played the Pepsi Tour, which is on the West Coast. I played the Golden State Tour, which is in California. Done Monday qualifying for the Web.com, done Monday qualifying for the PGA Tour, been to, I think, 6 Q schools in my career. I've taught the game. I've played the game competitively for a long, long time. And I've taken basically the last 3.5 years off from competing full time so I could work on writing my book and establishing the charity that I developed. It's called Birdies for bipolar.org. If any of your listeners want to check that out, they can check that out at Birdies and then the number 4 bipolar.org. So I've taken a little bit of time away from the game from a competitive standpoint the last 3.5 years, trying to get organized with the book and also the charity, trying to build the charity. We're doing some really fun work right now with the VA hospital in St. Louis. We work with a lot of these guys that struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and all these guys are also, some of them are amputees. So what my foundation does is we have a couple fundraisers during the year, a golf tournament, a trivia night, and we take that money and we pay for these guys from the VA hospital to go compete in the Missouri amputee golf tournament. And it's been a wonderful partnership, Jeff. I mean, if you would have asked me, 5 or 6 years ago if I was going to be involved with veterans from the VA hospital in St. Louis, not only sending them to the Missouri amputee tournament, but I try to play with them every Thursday over in Granite City, Illinois, at Arlington Greens, where they have a golf league every Thursday for these guys to practice and play and prepare for some of the tournaments that they play throughout the course of the summer and the spring and the fall. So it's really been a nice partnership developing our foundation with those guys, and it's led to some beautiful new friendships and teaching some new people about the game. And right now, as I speak with you, I'm getting ready to start playing a little bit more competition now that I'm finished with the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when people first maybe see this episode on the 18 Strong page and maybe see, the book, they might be thinking, well, what does this really have to do with just a golf fitness podcast and what we normally talk about? Now, this is definitely a different subject matter than we normally touch on. Usually it's strength and power or nutrition and things like that. But I think that there's a lot of what you have in your book that I think people need to hear and see, and it ties in so much to the golfers and what they're doing on a regular basis, what these guys can take from your book and implement in their own game. So give us, for the listeners and myself, give us a little definition, basic definition, layman's terms of what bipolar is, and then why you decided to write this book.
Yeah, bipolar disorder is a very tricky animal. It is manageable. You can win against bipolar, but if you're not diligent about taking the steps that are needed to keep the disorder at arm's length, you can run into some problems with the disorder. So bipolar, there's two ends of the spectrum with bipolar disorder. There is the manic and the mania side of the disorder, when a person who has the disease, some of the manic signals and manic behavior would be not able to get a lot of sleep, very, very fast and jumbled conversation and talk. Sometimes when you're in a manic state, you'll go on spending sprees, spending money that's absolutely unnecessary in places that really are not needed. If you happen to have some bad extracurricular habits like I used to have, I used to drink quite a bit, and alcohol will exacerbate a lot of the symptoms of bipolar disorder. So, for example, if you're a person that goes out and drinks and you have bipolar, when you go out and you have a few cocktails and you're feeling pretty good at night, you'll have that sense of euphoria from on the manic side, and then on the next day you flip around and you have that hangover, and it's just a brutal hangover. It's a hangover with bipolar is really the reason that I quit drinking. I actually didn't quit drinking because of my issues with the disease. I quit drinking because the hangovers were so intense that I just felt like keeping alcohol out of my system was essential for both mental clarity and physical feeling, which I think goes back to what you're talking about your podcast and all your listeners out there. I mean, bipolar disorder, and just the same as golf, is it's all between your ears. It's a mental thing. It's a mental game, just like golf is. And I think that's why I was able to write the book, because I played golf. Obviously amateur golf, college golf, professional golf, because I played the game and understood what it took to play at a high level and shoot good scores. I think I was able to take those lessons that you need to play good golf and compete at a high level, and then take those lessons and compete against bipolar disorder. I mean, for many, many years, I was diagnosed in 2001 with it. And for many, many years, I just kind of ignored it, and I allowed the disease to rule my life and kind of own me a little bit. And back in 2011, right around this time of year, September, October, I kind of decided to get a handle on myself, and I quit drinking. And ever since then, I've done some other things too. The sobriety mixed with the right kinds of medication, the right amount of exercise, the right kind of diet. These are all things that are essential to battle against bipolar disorder, and frankly, all mental illness, really. On the flip, going back to the bipolar, on the flip side of the bipolar, I mentioned the mania and the manic behavior that you'll see if someone is not in the right state of mind. And then on the other side of the spectrum is the depressive side of the disorder. And I think anybody in the world, anybody that is going through life has felt depressed times, whether you have a death in the family, or you go through a divorce, or you have a breakup of some sort in a relationship, or any of those things can cause someone to feel depressed. And when you have bipolar disorder, depression will come at you a little bit more aggressively. And I think that it was essential for me, in order to win against the disorder. The only reason I was really able to win, Jeff, is because I played sports and I played golf in a competitive atmosphere. I mean, I learned at an early age how to compete. And luckily I was able to win a lot when I was young, and I learned what that feeling of winning was like. And, a couple of years ago, I had to kind of take the bull by the horns and get myself healthy and make sure that my health was my number one priority, because the disorder was overtaking my life. And that's the main reason I wrote the book. I realized that, one of the reasons that I was able to survive and get through my issues with the disease were because of my support system, my great family, my friends, people that kept an eye on me even when I didn't realize I was in peril. And because of those people, I was able to get healthy and get right. And I realized in writing the book that one of the main reasons I wrote it is because not everybody out there has a support system. Not everybody out there has, a family that's keeping an eye on them or friends that are keeping them in order. And I just felt like it was important from a help standpoint to try and share my story, because the disease, it's wild. It can absolutely cripple your life. It can put you into places that you never thought you would be. And once I kind of came to grips with the fact that I needed to really be proactive against it and get well and make my health my first priority, that's when I was really able to see some progress in my health. And then after the progress with my health came along, my golf, got a little bit better. Unfortunately, I hadn't played as much the last couple of years because I've been working on the book and trying to develop the charity. But, just as well as I do, if your mind is clear and your mind is healthy, you're going to play better golf. If your life off the golf course, we could cite a few examples. If your life off the golf course is not good, that can directly pour into your life on the golf course. And I know, you can share many stories, and I can share many stories of players before me that, had those struggles, and because their life off the golf course was no good, their play, suffered, or their play never improved. So, when you're talking about your show and what you do, as far as helping golfers, get their bodies more strong and fit, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I know that by working with you a couple of years ago and working with Kenny McDonald over this last winter, and then I'm going to work with you more, I know that by working physically with you guys, that my mental game is going to become stronger, just because I worked on the physical game with professionals like yourself who really know from a golf standpoint how to get the body in shape, all the things you need to do to play good golf. Because it's just one of those things, you know it in your subconscious. If you're practicing golf the right way, you're going to play well. If you're working out the right way, you're going to play well. All us competitive golfers, we're just trying to find a way to play well. I mean, we don't care what it takes. If it's something you got to eat, something you got to drink, if you got to jump rope, if you've got to do swimming, sprinting, whatever, the physical part pours so much into the mental game that what you and guys like Kenny McDonald are doing for people all over the country. I mean, it's important. It's important for golf, of course, to play higher, to play better, and play at a higher level. But it's just important for your everyday life. So, I mean, what you guys are doing isn't just for golf; it's for life as well.
Yeah, and I think going through your book, honestly, I really found it fascinating, because there were so many different roller coasters of stories that you told, and I want to share a few of those, or have you share a few of those. But it really seemed like the times that you were doing really well is when you had your medication going, you were eating well, you weren't drinking a lot, you were getting proper rest, and all those things you've kind of tied into what you call the 14 clubs at the end of the book, which we'll talk about towards the end here. But most of us know somebody who has been diagnosed with bipolar, but I didn't necessarily know the ins and outs and the highs and lows of what this really could do. So the stories in your book opened my eyes to a lot of different things. So, Mike, if you could, I want you to share one or even two of the most difficult memories that you have on the golf course, maybe one of the stories you had in the book, so the listeners can really get an idea of some of the irrational thoughts that you have and the different situations you got yourself into.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question. And I think, when you asked me that question, the first thing that jumps in my mind was an episode that I had in the middle of a U.S. Open qualifier back in 2005 at Forest Hills Country Club, which is in Chesterfield, Missouri. Good short track. I had, I played college golf from, 1997 through 2001. So by 2005, I think, I had turned pro, and I was going around the country, doing Monday qualifiers and doing the mini tours. And my disorder was getting out of control because, my life off the golf course was nuts. I mean, my priorities were terrible. My priorities were golf, let's go out and drink, let's go out and chase women, let's go out and drink, let's go out and chase women. So I didn't even have my health in the top 5 of my priorities. So when 2005 rolled around, I was really at almost the height of the issues that I had with the mania and the manic behavior. And so what happened was it was just a standard 18-hole U.S. Open local qualifier at Forest Hills, and I was in such a manic state of mind that I didn't realize any of the things that I was doing until 2 or 3 weeks after that day, when I was actually in a hospital trying to get better because of the manic behavior, winding me up in a hospital. So I remember I had a childhood friend. His name was David File. He caddied for me that day, and we had met at my home course at Westboro. We were going to meet there and then drive out to Forest Hills together. And from right from the get-go, I mean, I had the music blaring out of my car on the practice putting green at Westboro. I was waiting for Dave. He showed up and asked me, hey, what's going on with you? Did you do a bunch of ecstasy or cocaine on the way here? Because you're bouncing around. I said, no, man, I'm fine. I haven't had a drink in a couple weeks or a couple days, and I haven't done any drugs, man. I'm totally fine. Let's go to Forest Hills. Let's go kick ass. So we got in the car and we drove to Forest Hills, and on the way there, I was in such a manic haze. I had this like really deep-seated feeling that on my way to Forest Hills, I needed to stop at St. Joseph's Church in Baldwin, Missouri, which is on the way to the golf course. And Dave and I pull up into the parking lot that morning, and there's the carpools all lined up for the school kids that are going to school. And I get out. I park the car in the line, kind of off to the side. I drive. I get out of the car, and Dave says to me, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" I said, hold on, I'll be right back. And I ran up to a statue outside the church and gave the statue a high five real quickly, hopped back into the car, and we drove to Forest Hills. And Dave goes, "What the hell are you doing?" I go, "I was just doing that for good luck, man. We're going to be fine. We're going to go. We're going to play well." So we show up at Forest Hills, and I didn't have even enough time to warm up. We went right to the 10th tee. We went off number 10. And, I mean, when I'm playing good golf, I played golf at a very high level in college and, played high level golf as a professional. I mean, if I'm playing good golf, I'm going to shoot over par. And, it's not, I don't think it's that difficult for me to do that if I'm in my right mind. But that day, from start to finish, it was an absolute mess. I think I ended up being unable to record a score because on the 18th green, I had some fear that had just riddled my body, that if my ball or my playing competitors' golf balls went into the hole, that something bad was going to happen. And that's just an example of what the disorder can do to the human mind. I mean, I had these visions in my head because I was in such a manic state that if my golf ball or my two playing competitors' golf balls disappeared into the hole on the 18th green, that the world was going to end, or the 18th green was going to explode, or that something bad was going to happen. So, the whole round, I was kind of like this, but I was able to mask it a little bit in the sense that I wasn't being loud and obnoxious. I was scoring terribly. I think that I didn't end up recording a score because on the 18th green, when I had all that trouble thinking about disaster, I knocked my ball away from the hole when I was trying to finish for the day, and my caddy ended up having to run down to off the front of the green and grab my ball because I got disqualified because I couldn't finish the round. It's one of those things that at the time, it all seemed to make sense. It seemed to be the right thing to do. And then I remember going to the scoring area after the round, and Tom O'Toole Jr., who is now the president of the United States Golf Association, was the head official on site. And I remember feeling this terrible paranoia that if I were to sign the scorecard of my playing competitor, that something else bad was going to happen. So I was refusing to sign the scorecard. I mean, there was really no rhyme or reason to what happened on the 18th green and what happened throughout the course of the day, and then, to not even want to sign the scorecard. But luckily, I had known O'Toole for many, many years. He was a friend of my father's, And so I trusted him. So he said, Michael, listen, nothing's going to happen. Just sign the scorecard and then you can go home. And Tom had known about some of my issues, and it was pretty clear that I was in the middle of a bipolar episode right there. So he was able to reassure me that it'd be okay for me to sign the card. So I ended up signing the card. And I think, had I recorded a score that day, I'm going to guess I would have shot, 85, 87, maybe somewhere in that range, because during the course of the whole round, my mind was not on golf. My mind, even though I was physically there and I was hitting the shots and I was hitting the putts, my mind was not there. My mind was lost in a manic haze episode. But the thing about me and the thing that I was taught about the game is, no matter what you're shooting, and I want all your listeners to hear this. This has nothing to do with bipolar. This has to do with the game of golf. I don't care if you're going to shoot 100. I don't care if you're going to shoot 90. I don't care if you're going to shoot 80 or 70 or 60. You have got to finish your round. You got to finish your round and turn in your score. So even though I was in this manic haze, there was that thing in the back of my mind that said, okay, I know I'm not scoring well, but I have to finish this round, because if I don't finish the round and I walk off, that's quitting, and I was taught never, ever to quit when in golf or life or anything else. I mean, you're not going to quit. So I guess, technically I didn't finish the round because I wasn't able to post a score, but in my mind, I felt like that's why I needed to finish the 18th hole, even though I wasn't able to get the ball in the hole. But, that was probably one of the wildest times on the golf course for me. And I document that story in detail in the book, basically from the first tee all the way to the 18th green, all the way to the scoring area where O'Toole was there. And it's a perfect example of what the bipolar mind can do to you if it's not healthy. And, I mean, it was so bad, Jeff, that 2 months later, by that time, I'd gone into a hospital stay for a week or so and got myself healthy. And 2 months later, I realized that what had happened. I realized what I had done, and I found out I got the addresses for both my playing competitors that day. One's name was Terry Yake, who actually played for the Blues, the St. Louis Blues hockey team for a long time. Terry Yake was in our group that day, and then another guy named Paul Neiman, who's a fine amateur player around St. Louis and at one time played professional golf. And I knew that I had messed up so badly that I wanted to write those guys an apology letter. So I wrote those guys maybe like 2 months later. I got their addresses from the Metropolitan Amateur Golf Association in St. Louis, and I wrote them, an apology letter saying, "Hey, gentlemen, I'm sorry for my actions the day of the qualifier at Forest Hills. I wanted you to know that I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was in a hospital stay shortly thereafter, and I certainly didn't mean to disrespect you or disrespect the game. I just was in a mental place mentally where I couldn't really control it." And, it's funny because those guys are both now friends of mine. I see them quite often. I saw Terry Yake 2 weeks ago, and we laughed about it. We joked about it. And I see Paul Neiman from time to time around the St. Louis golf scene, and he's been really nice to me about it. And, it's just one of those things where, in life you mess up and you got to apologize and hold yourself accountable. And it's one of those deals. I wish it didn't happen, but it did. And so, I tried to take that story and share that in my book, and hopefully people, by reading the story of that day, will understand a little bit more about the details of what it's like to have a bipolar mind.
Well, there's so many stories that you do put in there, and I really love how open you are. And I mean, you basically tell everything, every detail of the story, which has incredible detail. I'm kind of curious how you remembered. So, I mean, you remember shots, you remember clubs, you remember distances,
Sure.
the holes. I mean, is that just kind of how your brain works? And is that part of this whole thing, or is that just something that you've always had?
I think that's a golf thing to a certain extent. I mean,
I think you're right.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest. I mean, if you have a shot in your life with a certain club on a certain day, whether like it's a hole in one or you hold out a shot from a fairway or you hold out a bunker shot, you remember that shot. You remember exactly your distance. You remember the wind. You remember the weather. And I think I've luckily been blessed with a good memory anyway. But I think golfers really take that memory level to an extra gear, because golf is such an interesting and great game in the sense that, just because someone hits a 6-iron from a certain distance doesn't mean the other person might hit a 6-iron from a certain distance. So from a memory standpoint, I think I enjoy remembering the good shots, and the bad shots on some of them in my book I did have to recall. just because you can bring yourself back to those, especially in tournaments. I think it's a lot easier to remember shots in tournaments too. I mean, it's one thing to play with your buddies or play at your home club, and you might not remember all those shots. But when you're in a tournament, especially maybe a Monday qualifier or a Q school event or certainly a PGA Tour event, I mean, I think you're going to be able to remember that. So I think it's a combo. I think it's the fact that it's the golfer's mind. It gets detailed like that. You can remember those kind of things as far as the details of yardages and club selection and things like that. But it's a combo, I think, a combo of the golf mind and just a good memory, basically.
Well, I want to talk about some of the Q school stuff, the mini tour stuff, and it seems
Sure.
there's the common theme throughout the book that, I mean, obviously you love golf, the purest form
Absolutely.
of golf, and that it seems is something that kept bringing you back, and it's almost like you had that one thing, that one goal to shoot for, and that really kept bringing you back and getting you in a good state when you were in those competitive rounds. And we all know, or I don't know personally, but we all hear about Q school, how stressful that is just for the everyday player. Now, somebody dealing with bipolar, and you personally, did that exacerbate things, or was that a little bit of a mental therapy for you?
I mean, I think it can. I think it can exacerbate pressure and anxiety. But on the flip side to that, I think when you get off to a good start and you find your rhythm in either a round or for an entire tournament, I think for me, the bipolar is an ally, where if I get off to a good start and I get going, then I can kind of just go and not be too concerned about it. Now, on the flip side to that, if I don't get off to a good start, then there can be a little bit more pressure, a little bit more anxiety about playing well. But there's no pressure like the first tee at Q school. Nothing like it. I mean, except for maybe, and I don't know, but I would imagine the Ryder Cup's probably similar or maybe a little bit worse. But the first tee at the Q school, and I played in 6 of them, it's one of those things where the first couple times I went, I had no idea how to control it. I had no idea. It's kind of like bipolar. I didn't really know what to do to handle it. And my first couple trips to Q school were very shaky. And then as I got used to the pressure, played more competition, I started to learn to really love that adrenaline that you could only get at Q school. You can't get that at playing in a mini tour event. You can kind of get it at a Monday qualifier a little bit, but the Q school puts you through such an intense adrenaline rush that you need to learn how to handle that adrenaline. And I think as I got older, I was able to learn how to do that. When I was young, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Jeffrey, I wasn't a great player my first 5 years out of college. I mean, I was a good college player. I mean, I was an All-American and all that, but I was not a seasoned player. There was a lot of things I needed to learn. I needed to learn a lot about short game, a lot about the mental game that I didn't know. But the adrenaline at Q school it can't be compared to anything else I've ever felt. But it's just like any other sporting endeavor or competition. Once you get going and you get locked in and you're starting to play well, everything seems to take care of itself. But on the flip side, when things aren't going, when you aren't playing great and you're kind of grinding and you need something good to happen, the pressure is there. But also too, I think the pressure is something that you really put on yourself. You can decide how much pressure you want to put on yourself. And one of the things that I've learned, and definitely the last 5 years, is this terminology that I use with a lot of guys that I play with and some guys that caddy for me. Is this not caring attitude. We always talk about Freddie Couples and how he, when Freddie Couples walks around the golf course, it looks like he just doesn't care, and that's why he plays well. And friends of mine and guys that caddy for me, we talk about that routinely. Like, hey, are you caring today? Did you play yesterday? Did you care? That's something that we really work on, like not caring. And once I learned how to not care so much, it's really a lot easier to shoot a good score. But when you're out there trying real hard, trying too hard and grinding and white knuckling the club, and, that's when the pressure ratchets up because you're putting that extra pressure on yourself. But if you're out there walking around like Freddie Couples or Ernie Els and you're like, well, I don't really care. I'm going to hit these shots and I'm going to add up my score. And at the end of the day, the score is going to be the score. But if you put that extra pressure on yourself, like, I've got to shoot this score on the front nine. I've got to shoot this score for the whole 18 holes. I've got to shoot this score on the back nine. one of the things that I think bipolar does to people is it helps you, unfortunately, to add pressure to yourself. But if you learn, and it took me a long, long time, if you learn that the pressure is all what you make of it, and if you have to really embrace the pressure. You have to enjoy that adrenaline. If you don't enjoy feeling nervous and having your heart rate up and having your hands a little shaky when you're putting and chipping, if you don't enjoy that, well, then you're not in the right business, because that's tournament golf, and that's how it's always going to be. And I'll be honest, I've had plenty of times when the disorder has kind of overridden my ability to be nervous, and I would be in a depressed mode. Therefore, I wouldn't get nervous. And I knew after years of dealing with the disorder and years of playing competitive golf, there was a couple times where I would wind up on the first tee at a tournament and I wouldn't be nervous. And that's when I knew that the disorder, that I was on the little bit of the depressed side. So to be honest with you, now I am, when I play a tournament, unfortunately the last 3 years I haven't played a whole lot of tournaments, but I'm looking for that adrenaline. I'm looking for that nervous energy. I want the pressure, because if you don't want the pressure and you don't want to feel that adrenaline, then you're not going to play your best golf. You're really not. I mean, you certainly want to try to get relaxed out there, and you usually do after you make a couple birdies and you start getting going in the right direction. But if you don't embrace that pressure, the pressure will eat you up. We've seen it many times. I mean, I've choked down the stretch just as many times as I've come through down the stretch in rounds or tournaments. And all those times that you choke, those are learning experiences. And choke is I don't know if that's the best word to use, but I'm just taking a page out of Johnny Miller's book for a moment. But I think, you're going to have those times when you succeed, when maybe you play the last 4 holes and 2 under and you make a cut, or you beat your buddies in a Nassau. You have those days, but you're also going to have those days where, you got it right in the middle of the fairway on the 18th hole from 150 yards and you miss the green and then make a sloppy double bogey. I mean, that's just golf. You have to understand that the game will beat you up if you let it. But if you embrace the game and understand that there's going to be ups and downs with golf, you have to take the good with the bad. I mean, that's just part of the game. And I love the game so much that I understand that there are going to be those days that are going to be ugly. I mean, that's the nature of the game. I mean, look at Jordan Spieth the last couple of days. It's like the guy's never played golf before, and he's been the best player in the world for the last 10 months. So, there's no one is immune to it. No, I don't care if you're the best player in the world or it's for a 25 handicap at a club somewhere. The game will beat you up unless you're careful and I think that's the great thing about golf. I think as you get older, you start to understand yourself more, and you start to understand the game more, and you can really I feel like as you get older, you can get more enjoyment out of the game, because, you don't get mad as easily. You understand that these things are going to happen. And you also understand that, if you get in the right state of mind, you can play some really nice shots and play some really good holes and shoot some really good rounds. So, the pressure is there, and it's always going to be there. And I guess to answer your question, if you don't like the pressure, then don't play golf,
Yeah, it's almost like the game of golf and bipolar disorder, they kind of mirror each other in that way, where there can be massive highs, massive lows, and you see that a lot in a lot of the stories you tell. So you came up with this idea of, it's almost like the learning process, going through the book and therapy and the hospital stays and the rounds of golf. You've come up with what you call the 14 clubs, and we don't need to go through each and every one of them, but just give the audience an idea of what the 14 clubs is and how you kind of summarize it up in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I came up with, after I wrote the story, I felt like I wanted to offer up something to people that had bipolar, kind of like a lesson, because in addition to playing competitive golf, I've given a lot of lessons. I taught golf at Stone Wolf Golf Club in Fairview Heights, Illinois. I taught golf at Peebly Farms in Eureka, Missouri. Taught golf all over the place, really. And I just felt like I needed to teach people a lesson about bipolar. I've taught a lot of golf lessons. I felt like I wanted to teach a lesson about bipolar. So, as we all know, 14 clubs is the maximum amount of clubs a tournament golfer is allowed to use to compete in a tournament. So I came up with what I call the 14 clubs, and they're in the back appendage of my book, and they are a list of things, the common sense things, really, Jeff, that people don't even realize they can do, not just people that have bipolar, but people that in everyday life, just regular people that don't have anything wrong with them. These 14 ideas that help you battle more so, I would say, bipolar depression than anything else. I mean, I was able to get the bipolar mania under control 4 years ago when I stopped drinking, but there still are symptoms that I have, and I know all other bipolar people have, with the depressive end of the spectrum. And like I said a little bit ago, a lot of people understand depression, or they felt depression because of things that have happened in your life. So I came up with the 14 clubs to help people understand that these are things that you can use every single day. You can use one of them for 5 minutes, or you can use some of them for 30 minutes, depending upon what you want to do with them. But these things keep bipolar depression away from the human mind, and definitely the bipolar mind for sure. And obviously the one that the first one on the list is medication. For me, I struggled for the first 5 years after being diagnosed, kind of accepting the fact that I needed to take medication. I was worried that because I was a good golfer in college and I got diagnosed 2 months out of college with the disease, I was concerned about taking medication because I was worried that, I was an All-American in college and I won amateur golf tournaments. I thought to myself, if I take this medicine, is this going to change my touch around the greens? Is this going to change my touch with my putter? Is this going to affect the way I move my body? So I was, unfortunately, from 2001 when I was diagnosed all the way to 2006, I was not very consistent about taking my medicine because I was concerned that the medication would affect my golf game. That goes back to where we were talking about a minute ago about my priorities being out of whack. I mean, my priorities should have been your health is first, golf is second. But at that time, I was in my early to mid-20s. I thought I knew everything, just like everybody else at that age. So I struggled to take the medication. So, one of the most important clubs in the 14 clubs is taking your meds every day. And I take my medication now every single day. I take it every morning when I wake up. I don't miss it. I take lithium, 900 milligrams. And when people ask me, what do you think about medication for bipolar? I said, you know what? I don't think it's completely essential. I think there's some people out there that live a healthy and good lifestyle while having bipolar that don't take medication. But I just, I had a 5-year window where I experimented with not taking medication. And unfortunately, every time I would go off my medication or I wasn't consistent with it, I would wind up in a hospital. So for me, again, just medication is very, very key. And then some of the other ones on the list of 14 clubs are, we talk about therapy. A lot of people will tell me, well, I don't really understand therapy, or I can't afford therapy. And, therapy, people don't understand. Therapy doesn't have to be with a mental health professional or a psychiatrist or a psychologist laying on a couch in their office. Therapy can be with anybody that you trust, whether it's a family member, your husband, your wife, even a kid, even your child, or a friend. If you trust someone enough to share your thoughts with, that's therapy right there. You don't have to go to a doctor's office to get therapy. And therapy is one of the important points in the 14 clubs. Another form of therapy that I learned in many of my hospital stays is music therapy. Music is really an essential, I think, for awakening the five senses. Music really gets your sense of sound going. Music can, make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, Jeff. I mean, music is a very powerful thing. And I tell you what, I can't play music. I don't have a musical bone in my body, but I can listen to it. And I think music therapy is something that people don't use enough. And that was something that I learned in Barnes Hospital during one of the therapy sessions there with one of the nurses. I mean, I didn't realize. I mean, I always liked music and I listened to music, but I didn't listen to it on purpose. I mean, now I listen to music on purpose, different kinds of music. And so you got therapy, music therapy, you got medication. I mentioned there the five senses. I'll be honest with you, Jeff. About 2 months ago, I was feeling some depressed. I was having some depressed feelings and some depressed signals were popping up. And I went to my doctor, and I said, "Doc, I have this book coming out." I said, "I'm playing really good golf. I'm in really good shape." I said, "But I feel a little down." He said, "Well, how are your five senses?" I said, "What do you mean?" And I had forgotten that he had told me this years ago about this technique. So if people are feeling depressed in any way, having any sort of depressed signals, lethargic behavior, groggy, sleeping too much, if you can somehow awaken your five senses, when you eat your food, really taste that food. Listening to music gets the sound going. Maybe feeling the grip on your putter, your driver can get the sense of touch going. Maybe smelling something that's very potent in your refrigerator gets that sense of smell going. Just activating those five senses really kills depression. So the point of my story in telling you this is after I went to my doctor and he reminded me of the five senses, it took me like 2 or 3 days to snap out of that depressed zone I was in, only because I got in touch with the five senses. So it's just very common sense stuff on the 14 clubs, and there's obviously a laundry list more. But these are things that are very simple, that can be used every single day, and it's not complicated. I mean, I think mental illness and certainly bipolar disorder can seem complicated, but it's really the way to combat it and the way to beat these things is common sense stuff. It's not this elaborate thing, these elaborate steps you have to go through to get well. These are just very simple, concise, clear-cut, fundamental ideas that keep you on your toes and keep you aware that you need to do certain things to be healthy. And I think the 14 clubs, and I said this the other day in a different interview, I think the 14 clubs, if you didn't even read a page of the story in the book and just went to the 14 clubs section, you could fight depression just from that. I mean, the story in the book, there's a lot of stories that are entertaining and wild and fascinating and all that, but you could even skip the writing in the book and just check out the 14 clubs and be able to defeat depression just from those. And that's one of the reasons I did that, because I felt like it was more or less a lesson. You know, bipolar people out there needed a lesson, just like a golfer needs a lesson. Just like I need a lesson when I go see you to work on my body. You know, I mean, we all need help from people that are experts in these areas. And, you know, unfortunately, I've become an expert in bipolar. I didn't know I was going to be one when I was a kid, but you know, the 14 clubs are probably the most important part of that book, really.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Everything else, all the stories and everything, and I'm sure that was very therapeutic for you to write all that stuff out and put it on paper and share it with your friends and your support system. But as far as the learning and educational piece, you're absolutely right. That last part of your book, and when I read through it, it really speaks to pretty much everybody as far as leading a life where, you know, you're happy, you're fulfilled, you're, you know, just
balanced.
Yeah, exactly. Balanced, accomplishing things at your highest level. You know, some of the other ones that I made mental note of that, you know, we talk about a lot here on the podcast even are just simple things: exercise, sleep, diet, routine, you know, being grateful for what you have, drinking water, you know, having a sense of humor, like that whole not caring thing even on the golf course, you know, being able to kind of let go when you're out there and just realize, first of all, you're playing a great game that you love, you're not at the office, and just kind of enjoy the surroundings that you're in. So there's a ton of information in the book that in just a second here I'll have you tell people where to go to get it. But I've got my usual questions that I like to ask people at the end of the interview. So first and foremost, and I have a feeling I know your answer on this one, but are you more of a Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore guy?
Oh, okay. I mean, Caddyshack. Don't get me wrong, though. I respect Happy, but Caddyshack is, I mean, I can remember before I knew anything about golf, Caddyshack, I think, came out in 1980. And I remember my dad putting me in front of the television, and there's the scene in Caddyshack where Al Czervik goes on that crazy ride in his boat. He takes over the reins from the boat driver, and he starts driving the boat. And there's a man in a rowboat that they're about to roll over, and they show this man's eyes get so big, and he dives over the side to avoid getting, you know, crushed by Al Czervik. And I remember being 3 and 4 years old, that guy's eyes getting so big that made me laugh. So my dad, whenever I was a kid and I was in a bad mood, which, you know, now looking back on it, I was bipolar, and I would get in a bad mood all the time. He would throw me in front of the television, and he would pop in the VCR, he'd pop in the tape of Caddyshack, and he would go right to the point where the guy was jumping off the boat and his eyes got real big. So, I mean, I've been watching Caddyshack since I was 3 years old. And then obviously as I got older, you know, I can recite, you know, every line of the movie. It's probably my favorite. It's probably my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, I figured, being the golf purist that you are, you had to go with Caddyshack too. But that's a great story.
Doubt.
Great background story there. All right, if you could put it in your own words, when you first heard the term 18 Strong, you know, we've got the 18 Strong podcast and website. What does that term conjure up into your mind?
Well, it's very interesting. You know, obviously you and I being from St. Louis, you know, we had that run in the Cardinals of 2011, and they had that moniker of was it 9 strong innings or 9 or a strong 9? I think.
Yeah, strong 9.
Strong 9. So when I saw the name of the podcast, I just felt like it was the same thing. Only instead of playing 9 innings, you're playing 18 holes. So you got to play each hole strong. You got to play each hole mentally strong. You got to play each hole physically strong. So that was kind of that's what I thought of immediately when I saw the label.
Awesome. All right, and then I've got one question that I want you to try to answer as succinctly as possible. What has golf taught you about bipolar disorder? And on the flip of that, what has bipolar disorder taught you about golf?
Very good. Very good question. I think that's probably a pretty simple thing. There's just the two P's, patience and perseverance. I think in order to beat and defeat bipolar disorder, I had to be perseverant. It had to have just massive perseverance. You could never lay down against it. You lay down against it, and you're going to wind up in either a hospital or the grave. I mean, truly, that's how intense it can be. So, I mean, the perseverance is essential with bipolar, and then obviously it's essential with golf because, let's say you're playing around a golf and you make a bogey. Well, you got to persevere and go birdie the next hole. I mean, that's the game. So, and I think as I've gotten older, I've learned more patience on the golf course. I think obviously being a young man, early 20s, mid 20s, being bipolar, not being healthy, totally, anger was a real problem. I mean, a real problem. And I don't get angry on the golf course anymore. It's just ridiculous. Anger is a waste of energy. Anger is the opposite of focus. But, to answer your question the best way I can, I think both patience and perseverance with both of them, with golf and bipolar, if you don't have both of those working together, you're going to struggle getting the ball in the hole, and you're going to struggle staying healthy. So the two P's, I'd say, patience and perseverance.
I love it. All right, man, where can people find out more about you and the book, Birdies, Bogeys, and Bipolar Disorder?
You can check out the book on Amazon.com under the title. You can check out the book on our website, the website for my nonprofit foundation. It's called Birdies for Bipolar .org, which is Birdies and then the number 4 and then bipolar.org. There's a link to get to the book there. And you can check out our website and you can see what we've been doing. I've assembled a really, really strong board of people, both inside and outside of St. Louis, people that are, educated at an extraordinarily high level. They're in business at an extraordinary high level. There's athletes involved with this. So we got a Cy Young Award winner on our board. So we've done some good things the last 3 years. We're going to be 3 years old here in December. And you can go to birdiesforbipolar.org. That's birdies, the number 4, bipolar.org, to learn about what we're doing, what we've done with our veteran connection in St. Louis, and what we've done, and some of the other money that we've spread out across the country to different charities and different organizations that we feel are doing good things in the mental health community. And we're going to continue to do that. I'm actually out of St. Louis right now on a trip, trying to get together with some new people, trying to find out some new ideas where we can take the mental health stuff to the next level. So I'm looking forward to growing the charity. And, the book speaks for itself. I mean, I've had a lot of people say, lots of different things. It's all positive. A lot of people will tell me they laugh. A lot of people will tell me they cry. A lot of people will tell me they're scared to death. A lot of people will tell me they just really enjoy finding out what it's really like to chase the PGA Tour. I think the PGA Tour is such an interesting thing, and the highest level of golf you can really get to. And people always ask me, whenever I've traveled all over the country, what's it like? Where do you go? What do you do? And all this is explained in the book. So it's going to give people a good idea on what it's like to really try and get to the highest level of golf. And we're excited about the book. We're excited about the charity. And I think the first few years wasn't easy. There was a lot of things that we had to do to get the charity in order. And the book, even though the book turned out wonderful, it was not an overnight easy thing. And I had a wonderful publisher out of Austin, Texas, called Greenleaf Book Group. That, boy, if anybody's out there listening, you're thinking about doing a book, contact Greenleaf Book Group in Austin, Texas. They are phenomenal. So, those are kind of the things we got going right now, Jeff. I'm looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to working with you. On my body when I get back, and really looking forward to playing more competition in 2016.
Awesome. And everybody will have all this stuff, we'll have it all linked up in the show notes, so they'll be able to get to the website. They'll be able to see all the stuff you guys have been doing. We'll post it on social media, so we'll definitely have the links in there for them to see this stuff. And I just want to say, Mike, the book really did open my eyes, and it was cool and kind of surreal to read it, knowing you, picturing you in these tournaments, in these situations, things going on.
Right.
Seeing the names of people that I also know. I want to give a huge shout out to your support group, your dad, your mom, your parents, everybody, and although I don't know them personally, I know a couple of the guys in the book. It just seems like they stuck by your side, and you guys have accomplished some amazing things. So the book is incredible. I encourage all of you guys to go grab it, read it, and share it with your friends, family. And Mike, just want to thank you for coming on the show, and look forward to working with you very soon.
Oh, Jeff, I thank you for your work. I really appreciate you having me on the show. I look forward to coming on in the future. And, bottom line is we're trying to help people play better. And I think what you do and what I'm doing with the book, we're trying to help people play better, and that's all you can really do.
You got it. All right, man. Thanks again.
Yeah, man. Take care, and we'll see you soon back in St. Louis.
Sounds good. So Mike really has a pretty incredible story, and, all the different things that he goes through, from 2001 when he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder to really present day, and all the struggles he's been through, the things that he's overcome. Just such a great story, and I really appreciate Mike for his candidness and, allowing us to kind of take a peek into that just by him writing the book, but then also answering a lot of the questions that we had here on the show. So it really opened my eyes to what bipolar disorder is, how crushing it can be for an individual, for a family. And, you look at what his parents went through, what his friends went through, all of them sticking by his side and helping him overcome this. And then, you just put the golf aspect in there, the pressure of Q school, the pressure of, the Monday qualifiers and all these different aspects. I just think there's a lot that we can all learn about our golf game, but also about, how we live our lives on a daily basis and creating that routine and creating those habits that will help us succeed and move forward. I do highly encourage you to go check out the book. Go to birdiesforbipolar.org. Support Mike, support him in his mission. And, if you or someone in your family suffers from any sort of mental illness, bipolar disorder especially, this book is a great way to create some awareness and understanding around the disorder and what that individual may be going through. So, definitely go and check out the book, support the cause. There is the ability to go and donate. I know that a lot of the 18 Strong listeners are very generous and love supporting those in the golf community. So if you would, go grab your copy of the book and pass along the word. As always, I thank you for coming to the 18 Strong podcast. Be sure, if you are a first-time listener, don't forget to go over to 18strong.com. We've got a ton of content over there as far as past podcasts, great guests. Definitely check out Austin Panther, episode number 11, and Max Prokopy, episode number 24. And all the other great guests and episodes that we have. And then we've got our YouTube channel, which soon will be transferred over onto 18strong.com on that platform as well. So don't forget to look at all of our videos and get some tips for your game, improving your fitness level. As always, appreciate you being here. Don't forget to train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.